Welcome to or welcome back to Joy Unfiltered. I'm Rachel, I'm your host, and this podcast is about where we rethink what it actually means to lead, live, and succeed. Because we've been taught that leadership requires more effort, more pressure, more endurance. But what if that's not actually the path forward? What if the real advantage is joy? Not as a reward you earn at the end, but as a strategy you use along the way. In this podcast, we explore joy-led leadership, choosing energy over exhaustion, regulation over urgency, integration over compartmentalization, and community over competition. This is not about toxic positivity. It is about learning how to access something real, sustainable, and powerful right in the middle of your real life. So let's get into it. Today, I want to talk about something that sits at the center of everything I am building right now: joy-led leadership. Not as a concept, not as a personality trait, but as a strategy. Because I believe we are in a moment where leadership is being redefined. Quietly, but unmistakably. The old model to push harder, endure more, prove yourself constantly, it's not just exhausting, it's unsustainable. And what I am seeing in conversations, in rooms, and especially in women, is a shift. A desire to lead differently. Not from depletion, but from something deeper, more regulated, more connected, more alive. And that's where joy-led leadership comes in. So let's talk about the 4 pillars of joy-led leadership. If you've listened before, we have talked about them in depth, but here's something I've learned. A reminder is always helpful. Not because you don't know this already or you haven't already listened, but because the world is constantly pulling you back into the opposite. So let's ground ourselves in these 4 pillars again. Joy-led leadership is built on 4 core shifts. And as I walk through these, just notice which one feels like the one you need most right now. First, joy over endurance. We've been taught that success comes from how much we can tolerate, how much we can push through, how much we can carry. But what if that's not a strength? What if real power comes from energy, not exhaustion? Joy over endurance means you don't have to suffer your way to success. You can build from what energizes you, what expands you, what actually feels good to sustain. Number 2, regulation over urgency. Urgency has been glamorized. Fast decisions, immediate responses, constant availability. But urgency dysregulates your nervous system. It pulls you into reaction instead of intention. Regulation says, pause, breathe, choose. From a regulated state, you don't just move faster, you move cleaner. Number 3, integration over compartmentalization. For a long time, leadership meant fragmentation. Work self, home self, private self, professional self. But all those different selves, that creates dissonance. And dissonance drains energy. Integration means you bring your whole self into the room. Not necessarily perfectly, not performatively, but honestly. And that coherence, that's where trust is built. And number 4, community over competition. We've been conditioned to see each other as competition, especially other women. But competition isolates. Community multiplies. When we collaborate, when we connect, when we build together, everything expands. Ideas, energy, opportunity. So, those are the pillars: joy over endurance, regulation over urgency, integration over compartmentalization, community over competition. And if you're listening, you might be thinking, okay, I get it. But what does joy actually mean in this context? Because we, and maybe me, use the word joy a lot. And depending on your experience, it can feel inspiring, or it can feel out of reach. Perhaps it feels a little fluffy, maybe even triggering. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about joy. Currently, there is a lot of conversation happening about happiness. You've probably seen Arthur Brooks. He is amazing, and he is on all the podcasts. He's on stages. He is everywhere right now talking about what it means to build a good life. And I want to say this clearly, I respect his work. I love his work. I think what he has done is incredibly valuable because he's taken something super abstract, happiness, and made it understandable. He talks about happiness having 3 macronutrients. And, as a wellness person and all into nutrition, I get it, macronutrients. Although normally I've been talking about protein, carbs, and fat. But let's talk about the macronutrients of happiness, which Arthur Brooks describes as enjoyment, satisfaction, meaning. Enjoyment being your present moment experience, satisfaction being progress, achievement, moving towards something, and meaning being connection to something bigger than yourself. It's a really powerful framework. It gives structure to something that can otherwise, like happiness, feel vague. But as I've been listening and reflecting and building joy-led leadership, I kept coming back to this question. Where does joy fit into all of this? Where does joy fit into all of this talk about happiness? Because joy doesn't feel the same as happiness. Joy feels more immediate, less dependent on outcomes, more accessible in real time, and more connected to how we move through our lives moment by moment. So I started to look at it a little differently. Not as something that happens after, but as something that happens within. Not as a result, but as a system. So perhaps we should talk about the macronutrients of joy, because if happiness has macronutrients, then so does joy. But here's the difference. Happiness is often something we evaluate. Joy is something that we experience. And more importantly, joy is something we can practice. So let's break down the 3 macronutrients of joy. The first one is noticing. Joy begins with attention. And let me just tell you a quick story. There have been so many days where I have been moving fast, thinking about what's next, what needs to get done, who do I need to email, who do I need to call, who do I need to respond to, and I walk right past something beautiful. And it's not until later that day that I realize that moment was available to me and I missed it. I didn't see the sunrise. I didn't see the beautiful flowers. I didn't see the new growth on the trees. Not because it wasn't there, but because I wasn't there. We are physically present in our lives, but sometimes we are mentally elsewhere. And here's what's fascinating. Your brain is wired to make this even worse. There's something called negativity bias, which means your brain is constantly scanning for problems. What's wrong? What needs fixing? What could go off track? And that made sense when survival was the goal. But now it keeps us from experiencing what's good. There's also research showing that nearly half of our waking life is spent thinking about something other than what we are currently doing. Half of our waking life is spent thinking about something other than what we are currently doing. That means we are literally missing our lives in real time. So noticing joy is not passive. It's a leadership move. It's choosing to say what's working right now. What feels good right now? What is here that I would normally rush past? So let's talk about that in real terms. You're in a conversation, and there's a moment where it just feels easy. No tension, no performance, just connection. Most people glide right past that. But a joy-led leader notices it. And when you notice it, you change your state. So noticing, that was the first macronutrient of joy. Let's move to the second. The second macronutrient of joy is allowing. Allowing is where joy either lands or gets completely shut down. You notice something good, and within seconds, your brain interrupts it. That's nice, but I don't have time for this. Let's keep moving. And just like that, the moment is gone. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was not allowed to stay. And this is important. When you stay with a positive emotion for even 10 to 20 seconds, so just 10 to 20 seconds, you begin to encode it into your long-term memory. You are training your brain to recognize and return to that positive state. But if you interrupt it too quickly, your brain doesn't register it as meaningful. So most people are having moments of joy. Most people are having moments of joy all the time, but not actually receiving them. Allowing is staying just a few seconds longer, letting it land in your body, letting it count. Here's another real life example. Have you ever had someone say something kind to you and your immediate response is to deflect it? Oh, it was nothing. I got it on sale. Oh, not a big deal. You minimize it. You move on. That is a missed opportunity for joy. Now imagine instead, you pause. You take it in. You look them in the eye and you say, thank you. You actually let it register. That is allowing. And that small shift changes your internal state. So now we have noticing, we have allowing, and the third macronutrient is sharing. Sharing is where it all gets exciting because sharing is where joy becomes exponential. Because joy was never meant to stay contained. It's like energy. It's meant to move. And there's really powerful research behind this. It's called emotional contagion. Your emotional state affects people around you. Your energy is not neutral, it's influential. So when you share joy, you are shifting the emotional climate of the entire room. And I've seen this happen in the simplest ways. Someone sends a message that says, "Hey, I thought of you when this happened." and suddenly your entire state changes. That's not small. That's leadership. Or someone walks into a room grounded, present, open, and without saying anything, the energy shifts and you can feel it. You can imagine yourself sitting in a room and that person walks in and everything changes. That's sharing. And this is where joy-led leadership becomes real. Because you're no longer waiting for the environment to feel good. You are contributing to it. You are shaping it. So if you want more joy in your life, don't just look for it. Create it. Circulate it. Offer it up. Again, those 3 macronutrients. Noticing, I see it. Allowing, I feel it. Sharing, I spread it. That's the joy cycle. That's how joy moves. And the most powerful, amazing part, you can access this anytime, right in the middle of your seemingly messy life. And this is why this matters for leadership. Because most leadership models are built on endurance. Push through. Figure it out. Handle more. But endurance depletes. Joy regenerates. When you understand how to generate joy, you create energy, and energy changes everything. Energy changes how you think, how you lead, how people experience you. This is joy-led leadership, not performative positivity, not pretending that things are perfect, not putting on rose-colored glasses, but knowing how to see reality, but how to access joy, how to access joy, something real in real time. So here's what I'm going to leave you with today. Notice one thing. Let yourself stay with it for 10 to 20 seconds and share it. That's it. That's it. Notice one thing. Let yourself stay with it and share it. Because joy isn't something you're going to wait for anymore. It's going to be something that you practice. So remember, this is Rachel. I am celebrating you today and every day. So have fun, live well, enjoy.